Well, here we are again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Ask Away live stream. Thanks to everybody who is joining me in the live chat, as always. And as always, if you are joining me in the live chat, and especially if you've never been here live for one of these before, or you just forgot the way it works, if you have questions for me in the live chat, please hold on to them until a little bit later in the show, because I always start the show by answering questions from my Patreon patrons who have pre-submitted questions. And once I get through all the pre-submitted patron questions, then I will turn to the live chat and we'll hang out and I'll answer any questions you all have in the live chat that you want to ask. And especially if you were planning on being generous and donating a super chat, please hang on to that until later, or else I won't see it probably, and I won't be able to acknowledge you during the show and express my gratitude. And so yeah, here we go. Patron questions. Ask away. It's fun, right? I'm going to take it. This is non-alcoholic. Okay. Because I'm a professional. I don't do this. I don't do live streams in an altered state of consciousness. You know, I take this seriously, which I think shows in maybe some of the other videos I do, not this shit so much. Anyway, first patron question is from Ayame, who says, have you read Skeptics Answered by D. James Kennedy? No, I have not, but I am very familiar with the late Mr. Kennedy. I actually had, he was on a list of books that I had, that I was thinking about doing for future Atheist Reads episodes. I never got to it. Of course, I decided to wrap up the Atheist Read series before I got to the D. James Kennedy book. There were a bunch. I still have a Word doc with just pages of titles of Christian apologetics that I could have done, but I didn't. You know, I didn't get around to it. But yeah, I don't remember if it was Skeptics Answered. It might have been, or one of the other books that D. James Kennedy used to hawk on his show. But yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, D. James Kennedy was one of my favorite televangelists. That's a weird compliment because, you know, as is the case with most televangelists, he was detestable. He was just awful. He would lie to people on TV and take their money, and that to me is a con artist. but that's who he was, and he was known because he was one of the guys. He and Robert Schuller had the same gimmick where they would address their congregation in a gown, you know, like an academic, like a graduation gown, right? But, you know, like he was some kind of professor at a university giving a commencement speech, and it was preposterous. And D. James Kennedy had the most unnatural speaking cadence of anyone I can recall off the top of my head. He would speak like this, and he would speak like this for an hour at a stretch, delivering his sermon to his rapt congregation in the sanctuary. That's the most, like, characteristic thing about D. James Kennedy. And you know, I'm pretty sure he was a young earth creationist, evolution denier, socially very conservative, anti-gay. I don't know. I think he died before trans equality became a big issue. So I don't, but I'm sure he wasn't a big fan of trans people either. He was an asshole and a prick. But he was entertaining to watch and to make fun of. And no, I never got to do one of his books for Atheist Reads, but the Skeptics Answered probably would have been one that I would have gotten to eventually. So yeah, very, very long-winded way of saying no for that answer, but I like to make fun of D. James Kennedy. Next question is from some random geek who got his question in early instead of waiting for it to you know, be buried in the middle. And some random geek says, "Hey Steve, so I figure you and your audience would appreciate this. Back in Ask Away 29, I asked if I should come out to my Gamergator, Carl Gon follower, Trump supporter younger brother as genderqueer, non-binary male. He is transphobic as fuck. I happen to not come out to him. Not that I fear for my safety, even though we live together and work at the same company, but I wasn't interested in having a conversation with him about anything, really. Well, on October 2nd, I posted a meme on Twitter that my Facebook friend shared and that went viral, and there's a link to it. And I'll show the tweet here in a second after I get done reading the question. But it goes on, several big accounts retweeted it, and it caught the attention of the dude bro gamer crowd, one of which, who I never heard of, quote tweeted it to his 5,000 followers, one of which is my younger brother. The big account and my brother had a back and forth to think about converting me, but my younger brother said, I think my brother is a lost cause. He, they is too far gone. He, they thinks that The Last Jedi is a good movie. I was so tempted to reply saying, that is a lie. The Last Jedi is a great movie and a great Star Wars movie, but I didn't. What do you think, Steve? Would you have responded? Would you have mentioned something to your family member like, hey, I saw what you said about me? P.S. It has been 2 weeks now, and nothing much has changed between my brother and I. We still don't talk about anything. It is not fruitful at all for us to talk about anything. Hell, I'm a fucking anarchist and barely want to talk to liberals some days, let alone gamer-gators and right-wingers who don't want to think of themselves as right-wingers. P.P.S. Please remind people about the charity links below until we are able to, until we live in a society without poverty, which is the only way for that to happen, is live in a society without capitalism. This is what many people have to do to survive. Beg online as an income. Yes, I'll remind everybody at the end of the show as well, but since Geek mentioned it in his question, yes, the charity links in the video description, please check them out. As always, if you can afford to donate, please do so to help our friends out. And if you can't donate, then please consider sharing them on your social media to spread the word, because as Geek says, there are some friends of ours, and of course many other people who we don't happen to be acquainted with, who are forced to resort to crowdfunding and things like that to, in many cases, just meet their basic needs. And it's shameful, and especially in a society as wealthy as ours, that people have to do that. But they do. So if you can help out, please help out. Now, here is the tweet in question. This is Some Random Geek's viral tweet from a few weeks ago. And as you can see, not only is it a video game reference, it's also a Stranger Things reference. And it's it says, your favorite Final Fantasy game has you taking on the role of Antifa to do battle against an evil corporation in a dystopian capitalist nightmare world while dressing in drag and teaming up with SJWs and furries. But tell me again how those people are ruining everything, you bootlicking Shinra lackey. So yeah, and as you can see, 2.4 thousand retweets, 7,000 likes. I'm pretty sure I've never had a tweet go that viral, so congratulations on that anyway. And yeah, that's the tweet that caused all the trouble with Some Random Geek and his brother. If my brother and I lived together, I feel like we would probably have to talk about it, but I completely get not talking about it, and I do not blame you for a second for not wanting to talk about it, and I agree with you. It probably is a completely pointless conversation. Like, I would maybe want to talk about it, not in the purpose of trying to persuade anybody or trying to, extract an apology, but just to say, hey, maybe next time, just talk to me first before you talk about it on the internet, seeing as how I am your brother. But no, I mean, I love that, I love that his way of explaining to the guy who retweeted you, the shitty Gamergator guy who retweeted you, was saying, oh, he's completely gone. He can't be helped. He thinks that Last Jedi is a good movie. Like, Last Jedi is such a great movie. And it really is like a bellwether, isn't it? When somebody really fucking hates that movie, like, doesn't just say, well, it wasn't really my cup of tea, or I had this problem or that problem. But if somebody says, like, oh, The Last Jedi, it's like the worst Star Wars movie. Oh, I hated that movie. Like, not every time, but probably 9 times out of 10, that person is just a huge asshole. So if his way of communicating that you are a lost left-wing SJW and you'll never be pulled back is to say, I think that Last Jedi is a great Star Wars movie, then you're probably doing something right. And I think that I think you're doing something right. So yeah, but it's a shitty situation with when you have family like that, and especially when you live together. But yeah, I don't blame you for not wanting to talk about it. I mean, there's probably no reason to. There's nothing to be gained from the conversation, it sounds like. Next question is from Tom McDonald. Some people whose opinion I value are in favor of Trump's abrupt withdrawal of troops from northern Syria on the grounds that any effort to reduce the U.S.'s military interference in other people's business is a good thing. Others, including me, are opposed to this specific withdrawal on the grounds that it leaves the best fighters against ISIS and the most progressive part of the Middle East, the Kurds, and especially Rojava, to the not-so-tender mercies of the Turks who hate them. Do you have an opinion on this? If so, what is it? I do. I am very sympathetic to the people who say, well, we shouldn't have our military in other people's countries in the first place. So even though Donald Trump is a terrible president and a terrible commander-in-chief, I'm not going to be upset about troops coming home because we shouldn't have them there in the first place. Like, I'm sympathetic to that, and I agree that American foreign policy is a disaster and has been for a very, very long time, and we have involved ourselves in the affairs of many countries that we had absolutely no business being involved, especially in a military way. Like, I'm completely on board with all of that, but we've sort of made this bed, like we've made this mess, and now we can't just pull out and say, oh, we changed our minds, we're history, because then it would make things even worse. You have to. I agree with pulling back and allowing other countries to handle their own affairs without us constantly interfering and trying to turn things to our advantage. But we can't just flip a switch and say, okay, we're done doing that. Because we are so invested and so involved. And situations like this Kurd situation in Syria, that's a perfect example. Like, yes, in theory, of course, pull the troops out. But in this case, I think that's a terrible move because it leaves the Kurds, who are allies of ours, who have done us quite a bit of help in fighting ISIS. It leaves them at the mercy of someone who wants to kill them all, and that's just, I even if you believe that the American military should not be involved in other people's conflicts and that our foreign policy should not be about nation building and regime change and all of that, like, I don't see how just pulling troops out and saying, sorry, allies, hope you don't all get killed is a defensible thing. I think it's a shitty situation all around. But pulling out our forces and saying, sorry, Kurds, best of luck, like, that's not the way to do it. So yeah, I think I agree in principle with the idea of let's stop involving ourselves in the affairs of other countries. But given the present situation, just abandoning our allies, as I think has happened with the Kurd situation, is indefensible. But it's completely in character and on brand for Trump, who doesn't care about our allies. Like, he doesn't even care about our very, very powerful, influential allies, let alone allies of ours like the Kurds, which have been great help in fighting ISIS and in the Middle East, but are not an economic superpower. I mean, if Trump is willing to piss off the rich and powerful allies, he's not going to give a shit about the Kurds. And also, let's not forget, ethnically, the Kurds are not exactly the type of folks that Trump is given to respecting or liking or thinking deserve basic rights anyway. So yeah, I think it's a terrible decision. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Steve, in the past month, have you made any significant progress toward completing If Footmen Tire You? I am glad, actually, that you occasionally jump up and give me a kick in the pants about this, because I'm pretty sure I have the script finished, but I haven't recorded it yet. So I need to record the riff script, and then I need to shoot the the host segments with me and Snuffy and Toby Benson and Jack. I think Millicent might be in it for a little bit. And then I need to start tapping my buddy Jason Bernay on the shoulder about the song that I asked him to do, to see if he's still up for doing that. And if he's not up for doing that, then I need to figure out something else. But yeah, there are pieces in place to finish it. I just need to actually push forward and finish it. So I know I've dragged my feet on that for a long time. I know I was supposed to have it done like last year, and it's still not done yet. So I apologize for that, and I'm glad that you remind me about it every once in a while, because I do want to finish it. I do want to really. I think it's going to be a really good video when it's finally done. But I'm a little bit closer to having it finished. But I just, as I believe was the situation last time you asked me, I just need to sit down and actually push through and do it. Next question is from JV. Okay, here it goes. But remember, you brought this upon yourself. Hey, Steve, long time, first time. Ha, just some radio talk show humor. Anyway, yeah, my question. Since 1992, this question has plagued me. Originally, I thought on the fourth time around in the TNG episode Cause and Effect, Worf said a completely different word to refer to Klingon deja vu. Turns out he just, and you'll have to mind my terrible Klingonese, pronounced nippa differently that one time. I always looked it up as a goof, but no one else ever brought it up in the history of bringing things up. So while doing research for this question, I couldn't seem to find anyone who has kept up countless nights anxious over this, like me. Anyway, am I just being way too pedantic about a once fictional language? And if not, did anyone ever come up with an in-universe explanation for this? You know, my explanation, because I know what you mean, and I think that's one of my favorite episodes of TNG, by the way, and I've watched that single episode probably as many different times as I've watched any episode of TNG. Cause and Effect, and for anyone watching who doesn't catch on from the title, Cause and Effect is the one where the Enterprise is caught in a time loop, and they keep reliving the same day over and over again, and the Enterprise blows up at the end of every day, and then the loop resets, and they go back through the same day again. And yeah, after the second or third time, I think, yeah, maybe the second time through, Worf says he's experiencing deja vu, but he doesn't say deja vu. He says the Klingon deja vu, which is nippa. I'm experiencing nippa, the feeling I have done this before. And like Riker's like, just say fucking deja vu, Worf. God. So yeah, he does pronounce it differently one of those times. And if you say it's the fourth time through, then I'll take your word for it. But I remember that he does say it a little differently the one of those times. And I just figured it was just him saying it differently. Like I never thought it was a different word. So I can't say it kept me up at night, because to me the explanation was always that he just said it different that time for whatever reason. Maybe it was a different take and Michael Dorn pronounced it differently, or maybe Worf just said it differently that time. You know, who knows? You know, but yeah, so it didn't keep me up at night. It never bothered me. I never thought there was anything all that notable about it, but I did notice it. So at least you are not alone in that. I did notice and have noticed that Worf pronounces that differently, different times that he says it. Question from Wellington Marcus. Steve, can you take a few minutes to discuss the time period that Disco went to? What's the state of the Federation, Klingons, Vulcan, Romulan Empire, etc.? I have no idea, because those episodes have not been aired yet. So I don't know. I mean, if you want me to speculate, just from the trailer that we've seen, it seems like, well, I think actually somebody, it might have been Kurtzman, Alex Kurtzman might have said in an interview that the Federation does still exist, but it has seriously declined since the last time we saw it. And just judging by the trailer, we know that the Trills are still around. There are Trill characters viewable in the trailer, and it looked like there was one of the symbiont pools. There was a quick shot of one of the symbiont pools where the symbionts live before they are joined. So there's going to be some Trill stuff in it. So the Trill home world is still there apparently. But as for the Klingons or the Romulans or anybody else, like I have no idea. I'm very curious. That's I think one of the most interesting creative moves that any Star Trek show ever has done, to completely change the time period and the setting. Midway through the series, to do 2 seasons set in the mid 23rd century, and then to do the 3rd season where they jump ahead almost 1,000 years. Like it's a really, really bold move, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it. But I mean, I know as much as you do. You know, I don't know, and I really don't have much to speculate on. I imagine that Klingons will still be around somehow, or maybe they won't be. I don't know. Maybe they've gone extinct. Maybe the Tribbles rose up and killed the Klingons. You know, that would be poetic justice, I think. Next question is from Alan Norton. Why does Snuffy put up with Millicent's bigotry toward non-Huskies? Don't get me wrong, I love Millicent. and your take on Husky culture in general to the point where I can't see one in real life without feeling like I'm being judged. But it really seems out of character for Stuffy to be so accepting of it. Well, Stuffy is Stuffy is non-confrontational for the most part. If you remember the storyline from last season with Stuffy and Joff, his quote unquote little brother that he used to be a mentor for, who grew up to now he's like some alt-right shithead. And Joff was terrible, was awful from the moment we first saw him, but Stuffy didn't actually confront him about it until I think Joff's last episode, when Stuffy finally hit a breaking point and said, "No, you can't do this. You can't be here. I'm not going to allow you to say these things or do these things anymore." And Joff was way more bigoted and way worse than Millicent has ever been. So Stuffy is non-confrontational. Stuffy also tolerates the criminal or quasi-criminal activities of Toby Benson and Jack for the most part. He sometimes expresses discomfort with it, but he's never. And there was an episode, I think 2 seasons ago, where he yelled at Toby Benson, like he got angry at Toby Benson about something, and it had to do with Toby Benson's personal conduct and his somewhat immoral activities. But for the most part, Stuffy and Toby Benson are very close friends, and Stuffy just puts up with that. So Stuffy is, even though I think he probably has the strongest moral center of any of the characters on the show, and he is the most obviously principled of all the characters on the show, he still has blind spots, and he still has things that he tolerates that maybe if he were strictly adhering to his principles and his morals, he shouldn't. That is to say, Stuffy is not perfect, and I like that about him. I suppose if he and Toby, or if he and Millicent were to have a heart-to-heart about it, maybe it would come up, and maybe Stuffy would express some discomfort with Millicent's, very elitist views about Huskies compared to other breeds, as she would say. But I think we've seen enough from Stuffy that it's not inconsistent with his character for him to be friends with Millicent and to maybe not be okay with it in the sense that he agrees with it, or that he's not offended by it in some way, but that it's not a constant, sore spot or a constant topic of argumentation with them. But yeah, that's a good question. I think you have to write it down to Stuffy being accustomed to overlooking things like that about his friends. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Hey, Steve. So this is a fan theory about the Eugenics War that I floated around out there, and I know you wanted to make a statement video about it. In my story, the prelude starts at the end of 1992 as the Soviet Union fell, and ethnic rivalries that were held in place by colonialism and communism are once again brought to the surface. Just like our 90s timeline, there were ethnic wars in Asia and Europe that killed thousands. Basically, a radical racist organization known as the Order wanted to create a superior breed of humans. To do this, they orchestrate a series of ethnic and racial conflicts to destabilize the post-Cold War. Such conflicts included the Rodney King situation, the Rwandan genocide, and the crisis in the then former Yugoslavia. The Order employs the use of temporal agents to aggravate the ethnic conflicts in the region, who take the positions of demigods, politicians, and warlords. In Russia, ultranationalists take over the government and detonate nukes in Chechnya. America, reeling from the riots in Los Angeles and other cities, is thrust into the war when, on October 20th, 1994, the Oklahoma City bombing, Timothy McVeigh being a temporal agent, occurs along with the destruction of several other government facilities in the country. This was done by the Order's ally, the American Spartans, who want to overthrow the American government. Fighting the Order and its allies is an underground global resistance movement called the Partisans, who fight to stop the Order. They eventually are successful after a decade of war in which killed millions, and while difficult, humanity survives and recovers to successfully perform their warp flight in 2063. I know this storyline seems dumb as a bag of rocks, but I just wanted your input. The thing about the Eugenics War, and I'm shooting that video tonight after I'm done with this live stream. And your storyline reminds me a little bit. There are obviously a lot of differences, but it reminds me a little bit of the Eugenics Wars novels by Greg Cox that I mentioned in the video. And in those, especially the I think it's the second one, the middle novel of the trilogy that deals mostly with the Eugenics Wars. He wants to reconcile the Eugenics Wars with actual history that we all remember. And he does it by saying, well, the wars actually happened, but it was kind of a secret war. And there were conflicts that we didn't realize at the time were part of the Eugenics Wars that actually were part of the Eugenics Wars. And yes, these genetically engineered supermen had taken control of all these countries, but it was behind the scenes, and they were sort of pulling the strings. And they weren't the public leaders of these countries. So it was all sort of without anybody knowing about it. And what you're describing sounds a little bit like that, only a little bit, only more public, and a bit harder to miss. But the idea of trying to make the Eugenics Wars fit in with actual history, which has now caught up to the time period where the Eugenics Wars are said to have taken place. I mean, I feel like that's something that Star Trek fans have just gotten used to doing. And it's really fun. Like, hopefully my video puts that point across, that the main reason to do it isn't because you have to or because Star Trek sucks unless you can reconcile all these things. It's that, it's fun. It's a fun exercise to say, okay, well, if the eugenics, we lived through the 90s and we didn't see any eugenics wars, but Star Trek says that the eugenics wars did happen. So how does that work? It's just a fun exercise in headcanoning. But yeah, and your solution is, that works. I guess it just depends on how much, what your priorities are. Do you want it to fit in with history that actually happened, or are you just trying to fill in the details of the eugenics wars for yourself in a way that is entertaining and creative for you? But yeah, I think that works, and I think they took a similar tactic in the Khan comic book miniseries, where as Khan tells it, the eugenics wars were like just an open conflict, and there was no getting around that they happened, and so it just happened differently in Star Trek history than it happened here. But that's not as fun. It's not as much fun if you don't try to figure out how both can be true. Next question is from John Burns. Burnsy, hi Steve, wondering if you've heard about this. Back in the bad old days of World War II, the U.S. spoke with the Mafia in their country about getting intelligence about the Italian front through the Mafia's connections in Italy. Anyway, skip ahead to the early 90s, and the Soviet Union has collapsed, and the government of Italy decides, well, the Mafia was a powerful counterbalance to the possibility of communism. But with the fall of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, there's less interest in protecting them, and trials against members of the Mafia started in earnest. One of the things that this caused was many Mafia members who had always had an interest in being integral members of their communities caused many to help getting community projects working, even on a small scale, not out of fear, but more as a kind of public relations action. There were others who thought that murdering government officials, like prosecutors, was an option, but who ended up on the run or being captured. I was wondering if you'd heard about this, and it was something that I think shows how similar all of us are. Those in Italy who figured, well, I'm going to get arrested anyway, versus those who were thinking, well, the information I have about those murders and who did them, not me, is nice, but if I helped get a new park or a highway or a school or a library built nearby, that might cause the feds to ignore my shoplifting felony. I hope you enjoyed your weekend. No, actually, I did not hear this story. I was not familiar with this before you brought it up, so thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it does, I guess it does. There are two different kinds of people, I guess, or there are at least two different kinds of people. And yeah, one type of person in that situation would say, well, I'm not going to prison. I'm going to kill the prosecutor who's going to prosecute me. And then the other one might say, well, maybe I can use whatever time I have left to do good, and it'll even out the balance sheet a little bit. So if I do get arrested, they can take that into account. Maybe they'll see that I'm not such a bad guy anymore. There are two ways you can handle it, and I guess it just depends on what kind of person you are. But yeah, that's interesting. I was not familiar with that particular story from history, and I didn't know that about the Italian government and the changing attitude toward the mafia in Italy. That's really interesting. Next question is from Matthew Rick. Have you ever watched Ronald D. Moore's Battlestar Galactica series? I just binge watched it and was struck by how it is thematically and tonally similar to how Star Trek Voyager could have been if Voyager had good writers and decided to fully embrace its premise rather than become a milquetoast TNG light. Voyager was in the perfect position to explore power dynamics in a Starfleet versus Maquis crew, shortages of supplies, food, energy, and how those could cause disloyalty or even mutiny on Voyager, especially if Voyager was constantly on the run to keep from being attacked. Think Year of Hell, but the spirit of that episode happening all the time. Your thoughts? Yeah, I have seen the first season of Battlestar Galactica, but nothing past that. And that's just because I didn't, it wasn't intentional. I really liked the first season of the Battlestar Galactica reboot. I just never got back to it after that. I think somebody gave me the box set of the first season on DVD as a Christmas present or a birthday present one year, and I just never picked up the rest of it. But yeah, I thought it was great, and I think you're right on the money that it's like Star Trek Voyager, only good. You know, I remember one of the first episodes of the Battlestar Galactica reboot. It might even have been in the pilot movie, but a major plot point was that they were going on a mission so they could get ammunition. Like they all they had was their ship or their little fleet, and they had no help. And they needed ammunition for their guns in case they got attacked by Cylons or whatever. And it was a very practical thing. It was like, well, what are we going to do? What's driving the story? It's this pursuit of a basic need, in this case, weapons for self-defense. And Voyager didn't do that kind of story very often, and I think it would have been a lot better if they had acknowledged their circumstances, if more stories had been driven by them being by themselves in a strange sector of the galaxy and needing to find ammunition, needing to find energy, needing to find food, instead of, as you said, basically just being a rehash of TNG with a few of the details tweaked. Yeah, I think it would have made Voyager a much better show if it had been a little bit. I don't know if Voyager didn't necessarily have to be as self-serious or gritty as Battlestar Galactica was. But acknowledging the situation and making the premise feel a little more important and relevant to the stories would have been a big improvement, I think. Next question is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. If we crash out of the EU and the UK economy goes to shit, Scotland will probably try to leave the UK and rejoin the EU. I feel kind of guilty about the fact that even though that'll be the will of the Scottish people, at least if it was decided by referendum, I kind of don't want them to be able to get out, because that'd make it a lot harder for Labour to win elections in future. Steve, suppose the population of a bunch of blue states, let's say California, Oregon, and Washington, voted to secede from the United States and form their own country. Would you be in favor of letting them go, even if you knew it could potentially mean giving the presidency to Republicans for the foreseeable future? No. I would not be in favor of letting them go. I don't think that secession of that kind should be allowed. Like I don't think a state should be allowed to just secede, or even a couple of states getting together. I don't think they should just be allowed to secede like that. If they want to secede, and if there is an agreement between them and the other states, or them and the federal government, or whatever, if they can negotiate a secession, then that's great. But if I don't think they should be able to just up and decide, hey, we're leaving. Sorry about, we know this will impact your society, the rest of your society and your economy, but fuck you, we're leaving. I don't think they should be allowed to just do that. I don't believe in that. But I will say this. If they did it and they succeeded and they were able to establish their own country apart from the United States, I would move there, if at all possible. If the Pacific coast of the United States broke off and formed its own nation and actually was able to do that and get on its feet and become a separate sovereign country, I would move there as soon as possible if I possibly could. And one of the reasons would be, yeah, would you really want to stick around in the United States with those far more progressive states no longer part of the country and no longer part of the voter base? Yeah, I don't think so. Next question is from Neo Normie. Yes, I wasn't the man who shot Liberty Valance. Good to know. Should more games have trans options on games? As I play girls a lot on games, especially Blaze on Streets of Rage 1, 2, and 3. And should there be trans divisions in pro wrestling, as the women's division in WWE is more entertaining than the guys now, along with I think there should be more intergender matches, like the Indies or CZW. I don't know if you necessarily need, maybe, if there were a large number of non-binary wrestlers, I could see maybe establishing a non-binary division if there were some reason to do that. But if you're going to start a company that does intergender matches anyway, then the gender divider would not be as important. And if you had non-binary wrestlers, they could compete with everybody else, and it wouldn't really matter if they were wrestling a man or a woman, because men and women would also wrestle each other. But now, as far as having a specific trans division, I don't think so. I think if a trans person identifies as a man or a woman, then they should be allowed to compete in the men's division or the women's division, whichever one applies to them. I think that's how you solve that problem. And as for intergender matches, I don't know. Part of me thinks, yeah, it's wrestling. It's it's predetermined. It's a work anyway, so why not? But there's another part of me that says are we encouraged, if we do a male versus female wrestling match, are we encouraging violence toward women? I think that sort of thing has to be handled very carefully. There have been companies that have done intergender matches, and actually, like Beyond Wrestling and a lot of independent wrestling shows do intergender matches fairly regularly, and from what I've seen, do a pretty good job of it. I saw an intergender match. What was it? Well, actually, I think this weekend, David Starr, who is a fantastic independent wrestler, is wrestling an intergender match against Mercedes Martinez, who again is a fantastic wrestler. And that'll probably be a good match. And I think there was a really good intergender match on an episode of Beyond Wrestling, or I think it was earlier this year, or maybe last year. It was Kylie Ray versus Orange Cassidy. And it turned out to be a really, really terrific match. It built in a very nice way and became a really entertaining match, I thought. So it can be done, but you just have to know how to do it. So in principle, I'm not against it, but I do have concerns, and I think it is something that can go wrong very easily. But if it's done correctly and responsibly, I think it could be a good thing. Yeah. Next question is from M. Greenwood. Hi, Steve. I was recently studying how people's religious beliefs can change over time. The research I read said that if someone is raised in a very conservative religious environment, that person is more likely to renounce faith entirely after experiencing a faith crisis or just starting to question their beliefs. Those raised in less conservative environments, however, are more likely to change denominations if their beliefs change. I was wondering if you've noticed this to be the case among the atheists you know. Thanks. Hope you have a great week, M. Greenwood. Well, thank you. I hope you have a great week too, and thank you for the question. I can't say that I have noticed it myself, but it does make sense to me. If you are raised in a religious tradition, and the tradition you are raised in is very orthodox and fundamentalist, and that is the form of religion that you come to know. And so to you, religion is this very stark, black and white, inflexible thing. Then if you start to lose your faith or question your faith, you might just say, well, this religion thing just isn't for me, and you'll cast it off entirely. Like, that makes sense to me. Whereas if you are raised in a more liberal faith, a more modern faith maybe, where things like questioning doctrine, questioning dogma, having doubts and acknowledging them are part of the faith experience, then yeah, you might be more, because then your concept of religion is more open and flexible, so you might feel like you have more space to still remain religious and perhaps even to remain within your religion in a broad sense. You might leave this particular church, but you'll still be a Christian, or you'll still be Jewish, or you'll still be a Muslim, or whatever you are. You'll just be a different form of it. Whereas if you were brought up in a very, very conservative form of it, you might say, well, if that's it, then that's not for me, so I'm just leaving entirely. So it makes sense to me. But I can't honestly say that I've noticed one way or the other in fellow atheists. But it sounds reasonable. It sounds like the kind of thing you would expect to be true if you didn't know that that's how people tend to go. Next question is from Ahoyerno. Last time you had an idea about how a small world government would be good if properly designed, and I've got a suggestion. In Europe, the final court of appeal for every member state is the Human Rights Courts, which rules based on the European Declaration of Human Rights. Whether you like or dislike the European Union, it's impossible to ignore the fact that the actual fucking human rights are the highest law on the continent. That's what I'd like to see, a human rights court that has worldwide jurisdiction. It's the smallest possible world government, and it'd be the best. What's the flaw? And just to be clear, no, corporations are not people. The EDHR does not apply to corporations, only people. That's important. That's a great example, and that is I was thinking of the International Criminal Court when I was trying to think of like an example of what I think would be like a good world government, something like that, a final stage of appeal, right? An authority above all other authorities that can be appealed to if all else fails. That's the appeal of some kind of world government apparatus to me. And yeah, an international court that every country is subject to is a great idea. And is just the kind of thing I'm talking about. And, you know, the International Criminal Court that we have now is fine, but there are a lot of countries that are not a part of it, including my country, the United States, which is absolutely shameful. Like, how can the United States call itself the beacon of liberty and freedom and human rights and not be a member of the International Criminal Court? That's like saying, yeah, we're the best, but also we're above the law. Like, it just doesn't work. You know, I truly wish that the United States would sign on and be a member of the International Criminal Court and be subject to the rulings of the International Criminal Court. And yeah, I think that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say a world government. And the European Union is another good example I can set. It's something like that, but applied to every country, you know. Not a heavy-handed authoritarian government, but just another layer that applies internationally. And yeah, and something like an international human rights court or something like that is exactly the sort of thing I'm talking about. Nicholas Gross, Steve, as a fellow atheist, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Religious tradition provides for a source of heroic stories and moral lessons. To what extent does being a fan of shows such as Star Trek or Babylon 5, Lord of the Rings, etc., fill that role? Yeah, I think for a lot of people, fandom of sci-fi or fantasy fills that role. Sure, I think we do have we do have a natural affinity for narrative and for heroic narrative, you know, for legends, for myths, for stories that tell us who we are. And everyday slice of life stories can do that, and stories based on reality can do that. But another really great way to do that has been practiced for probably as long as people have been telling stories is heroic stories and myths and legends. And yeah, stuff like Star Trek and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and comic book superheroes. Those are all really good examples of people who are making their own mythology. And the only difference is everybody knows that it's fictional. Like, nobody really thinks that Superman is a real person or that the Lord of the Rings is actual literal history. You know, we're all on the same page that it's fictional, but it still serves the same purpose. It allows us to become involved in the lives of extraordinary people. It allows us to engage with themes and philosophies that are important and interesting and hopefully useful to us. So yeah, I think things like Star Trek and fantasy stories and superhero stories definitely play that role for a lot of people. And they play that role for me. You know, even before I was calling myself an atheist, I think I probably got more useful moral instruction from Superman and Star Trek than I got from my actual religion, and that's not everybody. Some people do take a great deal of moral instruction from their religion, and for the better. There are some people who are really good people, and they cite their religious faith as a source of that, and good for them. But not everybody's like that. And for me personally, even before I thought of myself as an atheist, I got a lot more moral instruction and found more useful examples to follow in things like comic books and Star Trek than I did from religion. So yeah, I think you're right on the money with that. I think that it does fill that role for a lot of people. Next question is from David Colby. Since last time my question was so good that you had to rush through my book pitch, I'll put my book pitch first. The Templar and the Temptress is the sequel to The Squire and the Succubus. The main character, Sam, is a half-succubus, trying to be a virtuous knight in a world of high fantasy. In this book, she's being hounded by a pair of lesbian Templars and battles an ancient, sexy mummy. Check it out. And there's the link. And I neglected to put the link in the description before I started the live stream, David, but after the live stream wraps up, I will update the book link in the description, and I will link to this book. So everybody who wants to can just click the link and go check out your new book. Please check out David's latest book. And now for the question. Do you think it's kind of incredibly fucked up how cool the Federation is with the Klingons? The Klingons, after all, are still an empire. Since Praxis exploded, they aren't actively expanding anymore, but their economy still is heavily devoted to building warships and not infrastructure. They still have an empire, even if it's not growing. How many of those planets actually want to be in that empire? That makes Worf's pride in Klingon heritage seem kinda iffy. Like those old British guys who talk about how great the British Empire was, ignore the several million people they let starve to death in India. Though, to be fair, that was in the barbaric days of 1943. Or how about all that genocide and slavery? Do you think Worf would be on PragerU talking about how the Klingon Empire was right and just and good, and all those SJWs saying maybe we shouldn't assassinate people to determine who gets to rule the Empire, and isn't our religion just a horrifying death cult that exists to turn lower-class Klingons into cannon fodder for the wealthy noble houses? Are fools? That's a really good question. And yeah, it's one of those things that pops up when you think about Star Trek in real world terms, and you think like, wait a minute, if the Federation is like this free democratic society, why are they so cool with Klingons? And I suppose there's a strategic argument to be made that the Klingons are still a very powerful and influential empire, and they're really nice allies to have when it's time to fight someone else. So they want to stay on the Klingons' good side, and they just sort of overlook the other stuff. And so that's a reason. And as far as Worf, I think Worf during TNG might have been the kind of guy you're describing, where he would have sort of a blind loyalty to the Empire and sort of a misty-eyed nostalgia for Klingon heritage and Klingon history and the days of glory in the Empire. But by the time he gets to Deep Space Nine, and certainly by the end of Deep Space Nine, I feel like Worf has adopted a bit more of an even-handed view of the Empire. I think Worf is still very proud to be a Klingon, and he's still proud of his ethnic heritage and of his people, but he has a much more critical, questioning view of the government and of the Empire and how the Empire is run. So I think Worf by the end of Deep Space Nine would not be that PragerU Klingon, but maybe during TNG he might have been. Yeah, I think he might have been, because let's not forget he allowed them to falsely put a disgrace on him and dishonor him and his family when he knew that his family was innocent of those charges, to preserve the government and the empire of the Klingons. So he was willing to do that, and I don't know if Worf by the end of DS9 would have been willing to take that deal. I don't know if he believed as much in the government of the Empire, at that point. But maybe, I don't know. But I don't think he did by the end of Deep Space Nine. I think he had developed a lot beyond that. Next question is from Kenneth M. Crooms. Have you read The 5 Proofs of the Existence of God by Edward Facer? I was wondering if you had thought of doing an Atheist Reads video series on it. I mentioned during the first question about D. James Kennedy that I have a list of books that I could have done for Atheist Reads but didn't do. That book I don't think was on the list. I don't know if I'd ever heard of that book before I got your question. So no, I never thought of doing that book, and I don't do Atheist Reads anymore. So I'm probably not going to do it. I mean, I don't say I'm never ever ever going to do another Atheist Reads series, but for the near future, I'm done with it, and I'm not interested in doing it again. So I'm not going to do one on that book or any book anytime soon. But I might add it to the list just in case, But I mean, don't hold your breath waiting for it. Next question is from Danny K. Hi, Steve. Have you ever considered a possible revival of the 5 Stupid Things series? It's been a while since you made one, and things have definitely gotten stupider since then. It's a bit selfish of me to ask because I recently lost my cat, and listening to you pick things apart in your quintessentially curmudgeon way has helped to lift my spirits a tad. Thank you. Hope all is well. Well, I'm really sorry to hear about your cat, and I'm glad my stuff has helped you, and if my videos have helped you, have lift your spirits, and I think that's great. I mean, what's wrong with the new shit? Do you not like the new shit? Asking me to go back to the old shit? You're not liking the new shit? I'm kidding. 5 Things is another one that I have not completely closed the door, and I have mused from time to time about doing another one here and there. Like I don't think I'm going to pick it up and do it as a regular series ever again, where I'm just doing videos every week. But I might do another one here and there occasionally if I come up with a good topic or if there's something that's just crying out to be done. So yeah, I mean, I have no plans right now, but just as with the Atheist Read series, it could happen. And actually, it's a lot more likely that I will do another 5 Things video than I will do another Atheist Reads video at some point in the near future. I probably will do a 5 Things video at some point, maybe in the next year, maybe. It's a lot more likely than doing another Atheist Read series. So yeah, but I haven't made any specific plans. Next question is from Carlisle the Cinephile. Hello, Steve. First, I'd like to say that I have long been a fan of yours, and I'm really happy that I'm in a position where I can finally support the work you do on Patreon. As I've said before, your content has helped me through a lot of tough times in my life, and I'm thankful I can finally return the favor. Anyway, on to my question. With impeachment proceedings finally underway, I can't really get excited. Don't get me wrong, I loathe Donald Trump and think he is a dangerous disgrace to the office of the president. I just can't be fully behind impeachment for one reason: Mike Pence. I've always felt that Pence is even more dangerous than Trump because he presents himself with far more decorum than Trump ever has. But of course, Pence is just as hateful and bigoted as Trump is. He hides it under a far more affable facade. I fear that because he doesn't wear his true beliefs on his sleeve to the degree that Trump does, that his opposition would be far more willing to compromise with him. Add to that the fact that he's been a lifelong politician and knows the way that government is actually supposed to work, and I fear he'll be able to do far more damage than Trump could in a much more gradual and insidious way. Thus, I can't fully get behind Trump's impeachment unless there is something that implicates Pence and gets him removed from office as well. Does that make sense? What are your thoughts? I agree with you. I still think as much as I agree with what you're saying about Pence, and I do think that Pence, you can't ignore the fact that if Trump gets removed, then Pence goes right in there unless Pence can be impeached as well, and that's even less likely than Trump being removed. So, I mean, it's all very good point. But I still support impeachment and I still support removing Trump. I just think there's no argument against it. President Pence is a pretty good argument against it, but I don't think it's not persuasive to me. I think as bad of a president as Pence would be, and as much of a threat that Pence represents for the things you describe, how he is more conventional, he is more experienced in the workings of government, he is more superficially acceptable, especially to centrist Democrats who have been carrying around this bipartisanship fetish for their whole lives, and you can just tell. I like Cory Booker, but you can just tell when you watch Cory Booker, And they ask him one of those questions like at the last debate, where like, tell us about a person you disagreed with, who you made friends with. And he was, he couldn't wait to answer that question. He is just looking for any excuse to make friends with Republicans and show everybody how bipartisan he can be. And a lot of Democrats are the same way. I think Pelosi and Schumer are the same way, unfortunately. And a lot of powerful Democrats are the same way. And it's really a shame, because the Republican Party is a fucking nightmare, and nobody should be trying to make friends with them for any reason at this point, because they're all fucking horrible. But yeah, so someone like Pence would definitely pose a threat for that reason. But even with that possibility, I think Trump is so awful that he just has to go. But yeah, I agree. I mean, you're right to raise the the subject, and to remind us all that actually Pence wouldn't be so good either. Next question from Jin Hai. Sometimes I hear tales from conservative white people, such as, I grew up poor. I was up for the same job as my black college friend who had worse grades, and he got the job instead of me. Or, my cousin went bankrupt due to medical bills, and he applied for food stamps, but they rejected him, telling him that if his name was Juan, he would have been approved. Is there some alt-right media personality or internet community that tells people to spread these tales? Or do you think it's just individual people telling childish lies? I think it's a cultural thing. I think that American conservative culture for many years has had a persecution complex, has been practiced in victim playing. And I think for folks who, especially right-wing people who are less fortunate, who are of a lower economic class, it's easier for them to say, well, if not for that person over there, I would be doing great. If not for that black person over there taking the job I applied for, I would be doing great. It's that person's fault, and it's the special privileges that person has that is stopping me from doing what I should have done. It's more comforting to them to blame that person over there than to either A, take personal responsibility, or B, put the blame where it really belongs, which is most likely people in the party that they vote for, that would rather do the bidding of rich people than actually do anything to help out poor people, regardless of what color they are or what political party they belong to. So I don't think there needs to be an internet community or an alt-right or right-wing personality telling people to tell these stories. I think it's just a cultural thing that right-wingers have told for generations at this point. Well, it's not our fault, it's those people's fault, So, and it's a very comforting myth to pass along. Well, if not for, it's those welfare queens bleeding us dry, right? It's not Republicans cutting taxes on corporations and billionaires and cutting social services. That's not the problem, right? That's not the problem. It's not racist policing and criminal justice, and not just racist, but biased against poor people as well, with court fees and things like that make it so that the more money you have, the more likely you are to get justice in the criminal justice system. It's not stuff like that. No. It's not stuff like that needs to be reformed. It's those people over there that are a different color or come from a different country or whatever. It's their fault. They're getting unfair advantages over me, and that's why, right? It's just a comforting lie to tell yourself, so that you don't have to accept that it's either you or people like you who are running a system that disadvantages people that are to blame. But yeah, you don't need to say, well, who's telling them this? They're telling each other that, and it's been that way for a long time. John Gingras, hi Steve, I've got another Star Trek question here. How do you suppose the Federation president is chosen? And would there be term limits with the amount of Federation planets and different species? I imagine there are probably a rather large number of people who want to be president. Think of how many political ads there must be. Yeah, the Federation political system is very interesting to speculate about because it is a blank slate. We know very little about how the Federation government works. We know that it does appear to be a democracy. The Federation government officials do appear to be elected. There does seem to be there's a Federation Council, which seems to have representatives of many different Federation worlds. maybe even representatives from all Federation worlds. We're not really sure how the Federation Council works. And then there's also a president of the Federation. Is the president of the Federation elected by a direct popular vote? We don't know. Is the president of the Federation elected by the council? Maybe. Who knows? We don't know. Is there some galactic equivalent of the Electoral College in place? Like we don't know how it works. It does seem like there would have to be some kind of filtering mechanism. Otherwise, yeah, with all those people, with such a huge population, there would be so many candidates. How would you weed it out? Like maybe there's some kind of tiered runoff system, where it's like a tournament. They have like a gigantic like Final Four, March Madness tournament to determine the Federation president every 4 years or however long the term is. It's got to be something like that. There has to be some kind of tiered filtering system to weed it down, to narrow it down to the top 2, 3, 4, 5 candidates for the final vote, because otherwise, if you can't have a presidential election with 1,000 candidates and then say most votes win first past the post. Like, okay, so the person who got 5 votes won because everybody else got 4 votes or less because there were a fucking billion candidates. Like that's there has to be some kind of system in place. But as to what it is, who knows? Who knows? That's for the fanfic authors to decide. Nathaniel Robinson says, "Hi, Steve. Hope all is well. It seems whenever I let YouTube do what it wants, it plays your video about whether or not Discovery is canon. This led me to think how the concept of canon is applied differently to culture as it has been traditionally to sacred texts. From what I can tell, different Jewish and Christian traditions have different criteria as to why specific writings are canon or not, and not all of them are based on some assertion that it shows what happened in writing is what happened in real life. The concept of canonicity is quite fluid, except for the most fundamentalist. There are plenty of examples of internal inconsistencies between biblical texts, as well as times when religious authorities felt free to bring in extra biblical writings. In one example from Judaism, Joshua did not fit the Battle of Jericho. The archaeology shows a culture emerging within Canaanite society, not invading it, and Jewish religious authorities seem to accept this. On the other hand, Maccabees, which tells the story of Hanukkah, isn't considered canon despite telling the story of what some religious authorities be so much more rigid. How useful is it to say these things happened, did not happen when analyzing cultural products? This is a really good point. And I know, like, especially for us atheist folks, like we do tend to associate religion with the most fundamentalist, conservative forms of it. But you're right, there are many very long-standing, robust faith traditions that have a much more elastic concept of canon than we would associate, with a more fundamentalist religion. And you're right, there are some religions that are a lot more flexible when it comes to interpreting their scriptures, which they still take to be the word of God in some sense, than certain Star Trek fans are with interpreting canon of Star Trek, which we all agree is made up. So I think the concept of canon in general, it's the sort of thing, it's like the idea of canon is just like the idea of the law. If it's not a little bit flexible, it's useless. Like, it can't just be something that we blindly adhere to and never critique or question or change. It has to have some fluidity in it. It has to have some flexibility in it, or it's of no use to us, because that's the world we live in. We don't live in a world that is rigid and unchanging. We live in a world that is fluid and constantly changing. And our culture is the same way. So if something that is a part of our culture, like, say, Star Trek or Star Wars or a comic book superhero title, and we have a concept of canon for that says, okay, these stories count and these stories don't, that's going to change if that endures and stands the test of time for multiple generations. And we have to be willing to change it and allow it to change as different storytellers take it on, as different people listen to or read those stories and decide what they mean. That canonicity can't just be, well, it's written in stone and it always is going to be that way. It has to be flexible and changeable. And yes, there are certain religious traditions that realize that and have incorporated that into their faith. And I think, sci-fi fandom, Star Trek fandom in particular, would be a lot better off if more fans took that attitude and said, yeah, I love Star Trek. I'm okay with the concept of canon, but it can't be unchanging. It can't be immutable. We have to be able to interpret things and change things and add things and subtract things as we see fit. Like otherwise it's useless, you know? So yeah, I think that's a really good comparison and something that, again, we don't really think about that much. Here's one from John Brockman, Under the Wire. How do you stop a Trump from committing crimes? Answer, the same way you stop anyone else, by hitting them in the face with a fridge. This Patreon page is now under observation by the Treasury Department. You're welcome, Steve. Yeah, the Patreon page and now the YouTube channel, because I read it out loud on a live stream. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. You don't have to hit someone in the face with a fridge to stop them from doing the crime. You could also just put them in the fridge and close the door, you know. And if it's an old fridge, they might just get stuck in it. If it's a new fridge, one of these new safe fridges that won't trap children, you know, then you might have to wrap a chain around it or something to keep them from getting out. But you don't have to hit them with the fridge. You can use the fridge as a method of imprisonment as well, to hold them and keep them from committing crimes. And Matthew Datcher says, is it just me or is the current U.S. administration falling apart at the seams? What are we waiting for on the impeachment front? Man, you are preaching to the choir. I have no idea. I would love to know what the hell we're waiting for. I have the exact same question. Of course, I had that question like a year ago. I had that question like 2 years ago. I was like, we were like 6 months into the administration. And I was like, all right, let's get this over with. Like, come on, get rid of him. He sucks. He's going to get everyone killed. He's a bigot and an asshole. And let's just get him the hell out of there. Come on. What are we waiting for? Yeah, I'm right there with you. I've been right there for a while. I mean, hopefully things are about to move. At least as far as impeachment, I don't think the Senate is going to vote to convict him and remove him. But at least I think maybe by the end of the year, we will at least have articles of impeachment that have been passed by the House. So at least that's something. But yeah, what are we waiting for? I have no idea. And finally, last question from Joe McClory. Crap, forgot to do a question. Who is your least fave Star Trek regular? Well, you know, for a tossed off, like pulled out of your ass at the last second question, Joe, that's a pretty good question. My least favorite Star Trek regular. Oh, man. I mean, I hate to say this because I really like the actor who plays him, and I think he's a delight when you see him on convention panels and stuff, but I would probably have to say Chakotay, just because there's just nothing there. Like, I like Robert Beltran a lot, and I think when he goes to conventions and he tells his bitter stories about how much he hated the show, like, I think he's a delight. And Chakotay has his moments, you know, on the show. I think everybody was trying their best with what they had. But Chakotay, there's just nothing there. Like, I mean, you know, they occasionally, like, they decided, and think in like season 4 or season 5, they decided that he was a boxer, like out of nowhere. Like, fuck, he's a boxer, sure. And oh, by the way, his coach was Boothby, so they're like, fuck, sure, yeah. We'll just, you know, that's what they did on Voyager when they couldn't think of anything else to characterize their, you know, to develop their characters. They would just borrow shit from TNG, and they would borrow shit from Picard. You know, so, Janeway needs an arch nemesis. Q. Oh, that didn't take? Okay, fuck it. The Borg. Take Picard's arch nemesis, Janeway. And Chakotay needs a recurring character in his backstory that we can bring on every once in a while. Boothby. Sure. Ray Walston's not dead yet, right? Yeah, Chakotay and Boothby, they were tight too. Sure. And Boothby was like his Mickey. And he was like Rocky. And he was a boxer. Okay, sure. Yeah. Probably Chakotay, I would say. I mean, just not because I have anything specific against him or like I hate him, because I don't, but there's just nothing there. Like, I can't imagine being an actor and trying to play that character. Like, there's just nothing there. So yeah, I gotta say Chakotay. All right, that's it for the patron questions. So let's turn now to the live chat, and we'll hang out in the live chat here for the next 20 minutes, half an hour or so. And if anybody has any questions in the live chat, bring them on. Here we go. Oh, is the stream out of sync? I don't know what to say about that. I don't know. I don't know if I can fix it. Some random geek says, question, Steve, what are your thoughts on the most recent controversy with ContraPoints platforming the true scum Buck Angel in her latest video and doing it for clicks? Well, Natalie wrote a message to patrons recently saying that she is not a trans medicalist and that she'll do a video coming up explaining why she had that person on a video. So at least there's that. But I mean, I'm sympathetic with people who are losing patience. You know what I mean? Who are like, oh God, she keeps doing things that, you know, even if it doesn't represent her real views, like it's really, really looking bad. And it's the same sort of mistake that she makes over and over. Like you know, like how many chances do you get to screw up in the same basic way before people start saying, you know what, maybe I'm tired of giving her the benefit of the doubt. Like, I can't blame someone for thinking that. Like, I still think I still like her, you know, but I don't blame people for saying that was the last straw, you know, like I have to be honest. Like, here's one from John Burtz who says, why do you like Discovery so much? Because I think especially season 2, I thought it was a really good show. Season 1, I thought it had some problems, but generally speaking, I liked it. I thought it finished really strong. But season 2, I thought was fantastic. I said in my review video, by the end of season 2, I could honestly say I loved the show. I couldn't say at the end of season 1 that I loved the show. I said I liked it. I was intrigued by it. I was interested to see more, but I didn't love it. The end of season 2, I loved that show. I just thought, and I love the look of it. I think it's the best directed Star Trek series ever. I think aesthetically, in terms of its production design, it's the best Star Trek series ever. Technically, it's just fantastic. I think the acting is great. I think the characters are great. I love Saru. I love Michael Burnham. I love that version of Captain Pike. It's just a really good show. I don't know what to tell you. It's just a really good show. Liam Foley says, what do you think? I lost it. Hang on. I have to scroll up again. Sorry, Liam. I was in the middle of reading your question and it jumped up on me. What do you think it will take for the Republicans to get on board with impeachment? I honestly don't think they will, to be honest. I'm not waiting for that to happen. I think a few of them will. I think a handful of them might defect. I think maybe someone like Romney might get on board, but for the most part, I think most of them are in the tank for Trump. I think most of them honestly don't think he did anything wrong, or if he did, they don't care. Like, they don't think it's that big of a deal. Eric Heem is Ezel. Sorry if I can't read that. Question: do you have any thoughts on? No, I lost it again. This is live television, folks. Here we go. Do you have any thoughts concerning the sudden back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Tulsi Gabbard? Do you find what the media focuses on concerning Gabbard to be odd? No, I mean, I have problems with Gabbard. I thought, you know, her line of questioning in the debate where she kept jumping on people about, you know, regime change wars was a little odd. I mean, yeah, obviously I believe that American troops should not be involving themselves in the internal affairs of other countries and trying to create regime change like that. But, you know, I just, like I said in an answer to an earlier question, I don't think just pulling American troops out of places where they've been for so long without a plan for an orderly exit so that it won't leave a disaster behind when we're gone, I just don't think that's a good thing. I think there are lots of reasons to be concerned about Gabbard. I thought it was weird that Hillary all of a sudden just started talking about it out in the open. Like, I don't know what that means. But, I mean, Gabbard is not one of my favorite candidates, and part of it is my concern about her foreign policy type stuff. Seal0626, all other Trek speculation aside, what do you hope to see Susie Plaxton and Jeffrey Combs doing in Picard? I don't know. Are they in it? I hadn't heard that they were cast. I don't know. I have no idea. What would I like? I mean, maybe there's another Wei-Yun laying around that we didn't hear about. Maybe that wasn't her last Wei-Yun that Garrick shot at the end of Deep Space Nine, and there's another guy. I don't know. Or maybe he'll be Shran. Maybe he'll be like Shran's great-great-great-grandson, and he'll be an Andorian just hopping around. I don't know. I just saw someone ask... Who would win, the Dominion or the Borg? I guess the Dominion, because the Federation beat the Borg, and then the Federation beat the Dominion, but the Federation had a harder time beating the Dominion than beating the Borg, so I think the Dominion would beat the Borg. Plasma Burn Death, what do you think about Trump wanting to finally put a man on the moon? Yeah, that's exactly. Oh, but he meant, finally put another man on the moon or whatever. Okay, sure, I'm sure, yeah, whatever. Oh, Darylette says, some people start the millennial generation at the birth cohort of 1982. Since you say you were born in 1979 or 80, do you feel more Gen X or millennial? Yeah, I was born in 80. I was born in 1980, and I don't strongly identify with either generation. I've said before, I am either a very young Gen Xer or a very old millennial, and I don't really have a preference for either one. I don't feel like either one, but I could be either one, I guess, depending on how you categorize it. Phoenix Espresso says, last live stream I left a message in the chat regarding a video series by Mr. Atheist, but I'll try and post it again down below just in case there are any comments you can make on it. Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know. Some random geek says, the Bell riots will happen 5 years from now. Do you think Deep Space Nine was predicting the future? How much will we take before we do rise up? Well, I don't know about that, but I do mention that past tense two-parter in the Trek Actually video I'm shooting tonight, because that is another example where in a few years real history will catch up to Star Trek future history, and presumably it will be different, and we'll have to figure out how we reconcile that. Hopefully the real 2024 will not see people being herded into sanctuary districts, but you never know. Who knows? Oh, Joe McClory says, the Hans and Steve describing the ad bit was so good. Did you break while filming? If not, how? No, I did not break while filming. I did break at some point. Oh, when I broke when we were recording the voices for the animals, and Jack McPherson's line where he says, well, we're going to go watch some pornography, which won't have any ads in it because we've stolen it. It took me 2 or 3 tries to get that right because I broke from that line. But me and Hans, like watching the commercial and describing it, no, I didn't. I didn't break during those. But the Jack line made me crack up once or twice. Oh, Eddie Stone says, hi from the UK. Steve, wanted to say thank you for putting me onto Jessie Gender, submerged in her videos at the moment. So much excellent. Yeah, Jessie is great. I'm glad that me mentioning her got some more people to look her direction. Andrew Priest, hi Steve, just wondering, random ass question, do U.S. schools teach the bad stuff America has done, i.e. USAF brags about genocide in Korea? The UK doesn't teach some of our darker history, e.g. Cossacks. It's been a long time since I've been a public school student, so I don't know if things are different now, but when I was a student, some of the bad stuff was touched on very lightly and then immediately pushed aside. Like we talked about things like slavery and the internment camps during World War II, the putting Asian Americans and German Americans in concentration camps. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about forced relocation of Native Americans. Like we mentioned all of that stuff, but didn't spend a lot of time dwelling on it. And it was never like the curriculum did not really push to characterize that stuff as bad. But we covered it a little bit. I just got a super chat from Nathaniel Robinson who says, Syria, Bay of Pigs, plus fall of Saigon, plus Rwanda. Oh, Christ. Let's hope not. Maybe. Yeah. Thank you for the super chat and for the really depressing question. Appreciate it. A Trance says, what will be the state of the galaxy in season 3 of Discovery, the 32nd century? I have no idea. That's the fact that I don't know is one of the really intriguing things about it. We'll have to see. Jared Wiltshire says, question, are you pumped for Picard? I'm way more into it than I was before Discovery came out. Yeah, I'm super pumped for Picard. I cannot wait for Picard. January 23rd, I believe, is the release date, right? Yeah. I'm really excited about Picard, for real. Matthew Datcher says, who has what over the Republicans that make them act blind to 45's dangerousness, especially their hypocrisy compared to the Clinton impeachment? I don't know if anybody has anything on them. I think honestly they would just prefer to hang on to power. They think that Trump is their guy and he'll sign their bills if they can get him passed, and that's what they care about. And they certainly don't care about his personal shortcomings, if I can use a very mild term for it, because he's on their side. I think it's a double standard. I don't think we have to assume that anybody has anything on them. I think they're just shitty people, and they're being hypocritical because they're shameless hypocrites. Oh, Leto, I missed your question. I'm sorry. Let me go back and find it. Oh, how is Audie? Audie's great. Audie's great. She's really good. Actually, she has a very brief cameo at the end of the new Steve and Stuffy video. And she's right now, she's not in the room. I have the door closed while I'm doing this, but yeah, she's on the other side of the door, and I think she's probably had dinner by now. And I'm sure she's doing really good. And in general, she's doing really good. Oh, John Burt says, my wife wants to know why they don't play Trek shows on regular TV or cable. I think some cable channels play them. Some cable channels will run Trek reruns. Or do you mean like the new shows, like the CBS All Access stuff? That's just CBS wanting to drive traffic to their streaming service. Like, I think that's a totally commercial decision. They don't play it on regular TV because CBS made the decision to use new Star Trek shows as a draw to its new streaming service. Like, it's as simple as that. They want you to subscribe to the streaming service. That's why. It's the same reason why HBO isn't free. You know what I mean? Because they want the money. Some Random Geek says, shouldn't power be redistributed to everyone? Why do the representatives have so much power in our system? Well, because we elect them. It's a representative system. The people vote for the representatives, and then the representatives have the power for the duration of their term, limited by the Constitution and the rule of law. And then if they do a bad job, then they lose the next election. In theory, in principle, like I think, as I've said before, and I think we just disagree on this. On paper, I think representative democracy and American constitutional democracy is pretty good. It's just when it gets into practice and corrupt people use it for corrupt means that it turns to shit. On paper, if we all followed the rules, I think it would be a lot better. Here's a super chat from Moderate Content. Howdy, Comrade Shives. Much love from PDX. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. Yeah, Nick says, glad to see you haven't been entrapped by the ad again. Thank you. And by the way, Bethany, I'll go back and find your question, but I have missed a lot of questions because the chat scrolls so fast. If I missed your question, I apologize in advance. It's nothing personal. Let me see if I can find Bethany's question, and I'll drop back to the bottom. Oh, favorite recurring Enterprise character. Oh, boy. Favorite recurring Enterprise character. I mean, it might be Shran, actually. Shran was a pretty good recurring. There weren't a whole lot of really memorable recurring characters on Enterprise, at least not. Maybe Eric Sung, because it was always nice to see Brent Spiner, but he was only in that one storyline, wasn't he? Ambassador Saval, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, probably Shran. A Trance, your thoughts on Deep Space Nine showing up in Picard? That would be cool. I would love to see Deep Space Nine. I would love for Picard to just drop in and say, hello, how's everyone doing? Oh, Kira, how are you? You know, like just a little tease. That'd be nice. Some Random Geek says, doesn't power corrupt? So why have so much power being given to the few in representatives? Well, that's why there's supposed to be a rule of law to limit the corruption. You know, I mean, I'm not saying that it's a perfect system or that it's even the best imaginable system, but power does corrupt. That's why I favor things like term limits. You know, I favor term limits. I favor there being a method to directly recall representatives in addition to stuff like impeachment and things like that. I think we can introduce more checks to give more powerful remedies against corruption when it shows up and becomes a problem. Because, yeah, you're right, power does corrupt. But I still think a representative democracy is probably the best way to go in terms of a form of government. John Ginger says, Shran, actually. Is that a new segment? Yeah, maybe. Some Random Geek says, doesn't power corrupt? So why have so much power being given to the few in representatives? Well, that's why there's supposed to be a rule of law to limit the corruption. You know, I favor term limits. I favor there being a method to directly recall representatives in addition to stuff like impeachment and things like that. I think Pyrotonic, what do you think about the government taking away guns from their own citizens? I'm all for it, as long as we take them away from everybody, not just certain people. Like, I'm sympathetic to people who say, well, if you disarm marginalized people and vulnerable people, but white people still have guns, or the police still have guns, and it's like a corrupt, violent police department, then that's a problem. I agree with that. Like, those are all things that need to be addressed. But in general, I'm all for private citizens not having guns, like in principle. I think that's one of the few times when Beto O'Rourke has made me sit up and pay attention to him. When he's like, "You're goddamn right, we're taking your guns." I was like, "Oh yeah, cool, all right. Tell me more about this guy." So I have no problem in principle with private citizens not having guns and not being allowed to have guns and being forced legally to turn in whatever guns they have. I think that's completely fine, as long as it's done in a way that doesn't put marginalized people in greater danger. Moderate content is going to keep popping up to tell you love Voyager too, Shives. Yeah. I don't look. As I've said many times, Voyager is fine. It's my least favorite show, but Voyager is fine. I don't hate Voyager. John Burt says, "I love my gun. Why should I give it up? Because it's better for society as a whole if private citizens don't have guns." Like, like the fact that, if you had a nuclear bomb that you really loved, should you be allowed to keep it because you really love it? But it's mine. I love it. I wouldn't do anything bad with it. Like, it's a dangerous, deadly weapon. A gun exists only to kill and maim people. Like, that's the reason it exists. And just because you really like having one, that by itself is not a reason for me to say, "Oh, okay, well, you can keep it." Even if I trust that you'll never do anything bad with it. Well, maybe you lose it. Maybe somebody steals it from you. Maybe a kid finds it in your house that you failed to secure it, and they kill themselves with it accidentally, or they kill somebody else with it accidentally, or they kill somebody with it on purpose. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons that we just shouldn't have guns in private hands, and there are 40,000 reasons in the United States every year, because that's about how many people are killed from gun-related causes overall in the United States every year. Homicide, suicide, mass shootings, accidental death, between 30 and 40,000 people every year. That's more important to me than, well, I really like my gun. I really just want to keep it. I'm sorry. That's not persuasive to me at all. Some random geek, housing for all or UBI? Yeah, why not both? I'm all for both of them. Liam Foley, does Trump love and admire Putin or protecting his assets in Russia, or does Putin have dirt on Trump, or all the above? I mean, it could be all of the above. Who knows? With Trump, I think it's probably more likely that he sees some personal benefit to it, because I think everything with Trump comes back to himself and what he thinks is best for him. So it's probably closer to that than anything else. But I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Putin had dirt on Trump. I'm surprised that everybody doesn't have dirt on Trump. It's not like he's been terribly careful in his private life. JD Thompson says, what about disruptors? Disruptors are fine. Pedro Noguera says, if you had to write an episode for Star Trek in which characters from each series meet in the Nexus, which characters would you pick? I would love to do a proper crossover between the crew of the original, of Captain Kirk's Enterprise and Picard's Enterprise. Not the Generation stuff where it was just Picard and Kirk meeting, but like a full-on USS Enterprise NCC 1701 in the prime years during the 5-year mission, meeting up with Captain Picard and the crew of the Enterprise D from their prime years during TNG. That would be awesome. I would love to do that. If actors and if there were some feasible way to do it and get everybody involved, or maybe, I don't know how you would do it, but yes, the two most famous classic Enterprise crews coming together would be what I would do. Let me see. Phoenix Espresso, are you getting more questions in this chat than usual, so you can't quite keep track of everything? Yeah, I think the chat is moving pretty fast, and also I'm trying to keep up with it and kind of stay near the bottom of it instead of going back and catching questions that I missed. So I think I am missing more questions than usual, but I'm also keeping up with the chat more often. So there's kind of a trade-off. Once again, if you asked a question in the live chat and I missed it, I apologize. It was nothing personal. Pyrotonic, even if you take away guns, criminals are still able to get guns. I don't find that a persuasive argument. I mean, it's nearly impossible to get a machine gun. It's still possible that a criminal might get their hands on a machine gun. So should we just let everybody have a machine gun? You know, like there are lots of things that are illegal and tough to get legally that people still get illegally, but that doesn't mean we should make those things legal. Spudboy, do you have any thoughts on the Orville? Yeah, I like the Orville. I thought the Orville was good. I've watched every episode of it so far. I thought season 2 was better than season 1. I still think it's not as good as Discovery, but I like the Orville. I'm looking forward to the 3rd season. I'll watch the Orville probably as long as it's on. Seal 0626. If they do bow to popular demand and give us a Pike series, who would you want to see show up in it? Personally, I'd want to meet Emily Dax. Oh, that's interesting. I would honestly, if they do produce a Pike series, yeah, John Gingers, that's a good point. If you outlaw murder, then only criminals will murder people. Exactly. And Nick makes a similar point. If you treated every law, we couldn't enforce 100% as yeah, exactly. Just because people will break laws doesn't mean you shouldn't have laws. As for the Pike series, as cool as it would be to have that kind of fan service stuff, I would much rather them, if they do a Pike series, to avoid that as much as possible. And have the Enterprise crew be there, and a lot of those are people we've seen before, obviously. But for new characters on the show or characters they encounter during their adventures, have that be original stuff. Like, don't constantly go, but you're already doing a prequel, you're already revisiting things, you know, by just the nature of the show and the setting of it. So other than that, I would try to minimize that as much as possible and move in new directions instead of, you know, having established Star Trek characters pop in to say hi. That's what I would do. Pedro Noguera says, besides the bridge, no bloody A, B, C, or D, what other fictional places would you like to visit in the holodeck? Oh, man, where else would I like to go in the holodeck? The Hall of Heroes on the Klingon Empire. Deep Space Nine, obviously. I would love to visit Deep Space Nine. I'd love to visit the Defiant. I'd love to explore the Defiant. Yeah, there's all kinds of Star Trek settings that I like to go to. Yeah, I don't know. Hunter 1981, which alien race do you associate yourself with and why? I don't really associate with any of the alien races. I mean, I associate myself with humans because that's what I am. I mean, the other alien races are all sort of facets of humanity that have been stretched out, you know, into their own species. I don't really strongly associate with any of the other Star Trek races. Maybe that makes me weird. I don't know. By the will of Soros. Steve, if feminists go to feminist hell where you are alone and Family Guy and 2.5 Men for Eternity, would you continue to support feminism? Yes, I would make that sacrifice. And honestly, I mean, an eternity watching 2.5 Men, Jesus Christ, that sounds like hell. But I think I would still have to do it, yeah. Seal 0626, I'd love to see the promenade on DS9 built as part of a theme park. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. I mean, they did that for Star Wars in Disney World, right? They have like the Star Wars section now. If they did a Star Trek section and they just built like a full-size promenade, that would be fantastic. Didn't they do something like that for the Star Trek experience in Vegas before it was closed down? Wasn't there like a Quarks area? I don't know. I never went. I saw another question up here. Oh, Fallout 2 Forever about UBI. I once said I would vote for a president if they were for UBI. Have you thought about it more since Andrew Yang? Yeah. If UBI is your only idea, then I might not vote for you just because of that. And Andrew Yang, I think, is a good example of that. Like, universal income is a great idea, but I'm not voting for Andrew Yang because that's like, it's his only idea. And it is a good idea. I support universal income. I think it's a great idea, but yeah, I do kind of. It turns out I need more than that. Yeah. Yeah, Leto Yang is an ass. He is. He really. I mean, he has one good idea, and that's basically it. And yeah, UBI is part of the solution. Bethany says it's part of the solution, but it can't be the only step. Exactly. Exactly. Nathaniel Robinson, does Triumph of the Will deserve to be copied by contemporary films? Certain parts, in terms of its visuals, in terms of some of its style, maybe, not in terms of its celebration of fascism. I mean, the thing about Leni Riefenstahl is, depending on how you look at her, like she was a talented filmmaker. She just used her talents to glorify fascism. So it's kind of hard to get around that. You know, if you took lessons from Triumph of the Will in terms of like her technique or, you know, her camera placement or that kind of thing, and you said, oh, let me incorporate that into my filmmaking, like there's nothing wrong with that. But in terms of making propaganda for fascism, yeah, no, that's, filmmakers should not emulate that. No. John Burtz, how do you pay for universal income? You by taxing incredibly wealthy people far more than they're taxed now. That honestly, I mean, like it sounds reductive, but that's the way you pay for all kinds of stuff that we need to have. There are so many people in this country that control so much wealth that if you just Elizabeth Warren made the point in the last debate. I think the figure she used was 50 million, right? And I think she's talking about an income tax. That if you taxed people an extra 2% on every dollar they made above $50 million a year, you could fund, I think her example was Medicare for all, or no, she was, or you could pay for more wages for teachers, and you could fund all these government programs that are necessary. And that's 2% more in taxes on every dollar above $50 million in income. It's ridiculous that we even have to argue about this shit. How would you pay for universal basic income? I don't know specifically, but I know taxing rich people would be a big part of it. And you can't tell me that it's not morally preferable to tax people money that they will never miss, money that will not affect their lifestyle one bit, in order to take that money and redirect it and use it to fund programs that will help people who are living in absolute poverty and destitution, and pay for people to go to college. And you know, there's all kinds of better things you can do with that money than just letting the rich people keep it, who don't even know it's fucking there. It's just sitting there collecting interest, and it doesn't even really do them any good either. They just like to have it. It's my money. I earned it. I should get to keep it. Fuck that. How do we pay for it? We tax rich people. That's how we pay for it. That's how we should be paying for most of this shit. So anyway, one more question, and then I'm going to wrap up because I'm over the time I usually go. So Andrew Priest says, what's your favorite piece of Trek culture that's entered mainstream? My favorites are Red Shirted, Kobayashi Maru, and Growing the Beard. Oh, Growing the Beard, yeah. Growing the Beard is a good one. Red Shirt is a good one. Jeez. Beam Me Up Scotty, maybe, but you can't really use that in a conversation that much. Yeah, I don't know. Probably Growing the Beard for me personally, because, you know, for obvious reasons, and it's one that I use. Like I've used it in videos. Okay, one more, because it's a Deep Space Nine question. John Burt says, why is Deep Space Nine the best Trek series? Because it has the best central character. Captain Sisko is the most complete character in all of Star Trek. We see him in so many different stages of life and in so many different roles. We see him as a father and a son, as a commander and as a subordinate, as a friend and as an authority figure, as a prophet and as a non-believer. Like, we see Captain Sisko as so many different things. He's the most complete character in all of Star Trek. It has the characters with the best character arcs. I made a whole video about Nog a few weeks ago about what a great character arc he has. Almost every major character in Deep Space Nine has a significant character arc that they travel, so that they are different in some important way at the end of their run than they were at the beginning. And I just think that's a great way to do serialized drama. So I just think Deep Space, it was the best written. It was the most original within the Star Trek universe. It was the boldest, the one that was the most willing to take Star Trek and do different stuff with it and not just do another TNG show. Like I could talk all night about why I think Deep Space Nine is the best Trek show, but those are just a few of the reasons. So anyway, I'm gonna turn away from the live chat now, or else I could be here all night. I appreciate all of the questions, and I apologize to anybody whose question I didn't get to. I'm really sorry. It was not intentional. The chat. Oh no. Anachrome Media says, "Are you a Green New Deal guy?" Yes, absolutely. I support the Green New Deal 100%. Yeah. So anyway. And now I'm seriously not looking at the chat anymore. No more questions, but I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate all the questions. I apologize for missing anybody's questions. Reminder once again about the charity links in the description of the video. Check out the charity links for our friends who need a little help. And if you can afford to donate to any of them, please do. These are folks that are in need of financial support, financial assistance. Some of them are in very urgent situations where they need the money like soon. And if anything you can do to help would be very appreciated. Even if you can't donate yourself, if you're not in a position to do that, just sharing the links on your social media would be something and would help out. So I would really appreciate if you would do that. Also, if you enjoy what I do on YouTube, you can always become a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/Steve Shives. And one of the benefits of being a patron is you get to submit questions for Ask Away ahead of time. Ask Away streams are on Friday, the Monday before an Ask Away stream. I will always post a special patrons only post on my Patreon page asking for questions. You just leave a comment there and ask your question, and I will answer it on the next Ask Away show. First thing, the first segment of the show. Most of the show these days is me answering patron questions. So patreon.com/Steve Shives. You'll be guaranteed to get your question answered. And also, if you enjoy the YouTube stuff that I do, you might also be interested in the podcasts that I co-host along with the brilliant and hilarious Jason Harding. You can listen at letmelistenpodcasts.com, or links are also in the description to those. You can listen via RSS, via your favorite podcast app. I am the co-host along with Jason of Late Seating, the movie review podcast, and the Ensign's Log, a Star Trek-themed improv comedy podcast. And the newest episode of that just is up today. So listen to the new Ensign's Log if you haven't. If you really, especially if you like the Trek Actually stuff and the Star Trek themed videos I do, I think you'll really dig the Ensign's Log if you haven't given it a listen yet. So check out the Ensign's Log and check out Late Seating. And that's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all for the questions. Apologies again for missing questions in the live chat. But thank you for bearing with me and watching. I hope it was entertaining, and I hope you got, I don't know, something out of it. And I will see you next time. Have a good weekend, everybody.